Thank you so much for joining us for Summer Break with Mission Advancement. This is our third episode of the series, and today we're going to be talking about prospects. And I am Sarah Wise. I'm a consultant here with Mission Advancement, and I'm so thrilled that we have our Houston team here today. So we have Kedrian Day and Josh Plumley. So how are you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Great. Represent H-Town.
Good. Well, last week we talked about leadership and how important it is to have the right people in the right seats. And really talking about how leadership is having the leader of the organization, it really lives in their office. And also having to get the right people, the donor peers, involved as well, so they bring that validity and accountability to your fundraising and your project. So that was last week. So this week we're going to talk about prospects. And that may seem like a no-brainer topic, like, oh, no big deal, prospects. Of course we have prospects. But we really want to talk about how we actually really start to dig in, how we segment, and how we really begin to prioritize. And then how do we really dig in deeper with fewer donors when we're talking about major gift fundraising? So let's dive in. Let's talk about this. So when we are approaching a project as Mission Advancement and we get in with a client, and how do we even begin to talk to them and help them identify who the right prospects are?
Start with who got you there. We always say as an organization, who's funding you? Who got you to the point of where you need to go next? And so looking at the donor base, looking at your board, looking at past board members, all those relationships that you already have, and lean in on those to get you started.
Yeah. What do you say, though, to people who are like, we want new donors?
The warmth of those people. Have you tapped into how connected they are to the organization? So if you haven't done that, there's some homework for you, right? So instead of going out and looking at those new donors, let's look at who's in-house right now.
So how do we do that? How do we begin to actually do that and dig into prioritizing and segmenting those major gift donors?
Use a dartboard. No.
That could work, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's simple, but it's not always easy to process. Where do you start? And it's really identifying a process to help you prioritize your time with the relationships that, one, are going to get you to where you need to be, both financially, and are going to open up new doors if you're looking to expand, whether it's a project, whether it's a major event, whether it's a campaign, no matter what it is. You really need to prioritize your time based upon who those people are that can really get you going forward.
And of course, if you're looking at a huge donor database, I mean, you're thinking, how do I even take a bite out of that? So one way to prioritize that would probably be, I would think, to do what we like to call donor screening. So that means that you're pulling that database, and you're looking at those donors assessing them according to the warmth, the connection to the organization, their perceived capacity, because we don't know what they would give, but could they give a certain amount if they were connected to the organization? And then the relevance, right? Is this organization, the mission, is it really relevant to them or the project that they're working on?
Awesome. So when we do donor screening, like how many people do we involve in that process typically? Or how do you involve a client in making sure that goes well?
So every organization is a different size. Some of them are going to have 1,000+ names, of which they know maybe 5 or 10 people. Others are going to have 100. And so I think you want to start with a reasonable number that lets you actually go through, do these people know us? Do they care about us? Are they giving to us? Have they given to us in the past? And if you're looking at a list of 50 or 60 to get you going forward, and then prioritizing that based upon what Kedrian was saying, that are they even warm to you? Are they showing up to your events? Are they calling you back? I mean, those are the types of things that clue you in to people who want to talk to you first, and the people who want to really come and understand your project and understand your priorities a lot better.
Well, one thing that I think is also important to talk about is when we're doing this process as with donor screening, I think one of the big conversations is, who do we involve in this process when we're donor screening? Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, you want to involve the people that are connected in terms of like if you're working with a development director, the CEO or the president, the ED, board members. Maybe your chair might know a lot of people, and they can say, they can speak into how they feel about the organization. So you want to bring in as many people that have a relationship with those folks and they know enough about them that they can speak into the process.
Yeah. But we probably don't want too many people,
Not
right?
too
Like we
many,
generally
right,
try to
right.
limit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Try to limit a little bit, otherwise it's too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
We know how that works. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, once we've done donor screening and we're kind of beginning to work, I know one thing that we talk a lot about is the financial model and beginning to look for who are those prospects that are going to fit into the financial model. So can you talk a little bit about what is a financial model, first of all, and how do we begin to use that with our clients in working with prospects and identifying who might possibly, fit into that?
So the paper is going to show you your goal, and it's going to show you the different types of gifts, the sizes of gifts that you want to be able to raise. And so ideally your goal is to put a name in each of those gifts so that you can start to prioritize who you're going to go to and building those donor plans to be able to engage them. Because if you're not going to be able to marry your project or your campaign or your annual fund to the priorities and the motivations of your donors, then you're really looking at the wrong list. So that financial model is going to win it on paper just so that you aren't hoping for it.
Yeah, I think winning on paper is huge. We talk about that all the time with our clients. Also, do you feel that the financial model, how do you use that financial model with our clients to help kind of raise the sights of the donors? I feel like that's something we talk about all the time. And, how do you begin to use that, especially even with the internal staff, of getting them to understand what our process is about?
Well, one of the things is putting that in front of them on paper just raises their sights automatically, because they get to see how much it takes, what it's going to take, the types of gifts it's going to take, the size of gifts it's going to take to raise that amount, right? So, for instance, like if we're looking at a campaign, those top 30 gifts are some of the largest gifts to the campaign. And so when you're putting that in front of a donor and they go, wow, there's a lot more people that's going to have to come in and be a part of the group to help us get to that amount. So it's not those smaller gifts. Yeah, all those come to play a part, but it's those larger gifts that are going to need to come in to really move the campaign or the project forward.
Because organizations have to start thinking differently
Yeah.
when they're going to a place of few gifts that are going to be larger, that will actually take them to a place they've never gone before.
That's true.
And that often starts with them being able to think that first versus doing it the way they've always done it before, and that's just kind of relying on a lot of people.
Right. So the financial model is really a tool to help us with the staff as well as the donors to get them to understand what we're trying to do and going deeper with fewer donors.
Oh, they absolutely. They have to get it.
It's truly eye-opening, yeah, for them.
It's just not going to move it forward if they're not bought in as a staff, because they're going to be the ones putting together the work to move those relationships forward.
Okay, so we did the donor screening. We have the segmented prioritized donors. We know who maybe we're going to for the financial model, and we start putting those names in those boxes. So how do we begin to even start the process of thinking about a transformational donor experience? How do we work with clients through that process?
Give them an experience they want to repeat. It is a very, very simple sentence to hear, but this idea of people want to first trust you as an organization. And it's trusting the people, but it's also trusting that the organization can do what it says it can do. And so it really begins with the organization finding a way to create a story with that potential donor and to create an experience that's going to wow them. And that's going to really affirm that prospect's passions, their priorities, what are they motivated by, what are their values, and marry that with what the needs of the organization are. I know
I was going to say, you were talking about it, yeah, because it puts me in the mind of, we have this client, it's a school client, and one of the grandparents was the donor that the school was approaching. And so they brought the grandparent in for a tour. So his kids went to the school as well. So, and his grandkids were going to be coming to the school. So they brought him in for a tour, and he had been there in a while. So he's walking around and he's like, oh, I remember these different places and my kids were here. And then they brought him to a hall with all of this artwork on it. And as he starts to look at the artwork, they hone in on a section of artwork that kind of looked familiar. It was his kids' artwork. So his children, they were able to work with the school to get his kids old artwork. So he looked at it and it was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. It brought back memories, right? But then they were able to say, you know what? And now your grandkids, their artwork will be on this wall. But if you support this project, which was building a new art building, their kids would then, his grandkids would then be able to participate in the building and not just their art being on the wall. So that just gives me goosebumps when I've heard about that story. And so that's the kind of experience that you want to give people, that they think, I have to do this, and I want to bring other people along with me.
That's awesome. I think talk a little bit though about like backing up to how do we even get to that experience? Like how do we start to work with our clients on actually figuring out what are we going to do with these donors? So what is that process like, and how do we actually start to work with them on that?
Well, we lock ourselves in a room for a while and just, it's getting one-on-one. Like we sit down with team members in an organization and we sit down and talk about, all right, who are these people? What are their relationships? Like what do they care about? What causes? And I think what's huge is that a lot of times there's question marks because we just don't always know everything about our donors and the relationships. And what we do is we build that experience around a couple of things. Is what are the things that are meaningful to that relationship and appropriate to that relationship. But the big thing is not to let loose is those question marks, those unknowns, those are the things that we coach our clients to go and to find out in that relationship. Because if I'm a prospect and you're coming to me, Kedrian, and you know that I love a program that's for homeless children,
right,
but you don't know how that became a passion of mine, that question becomes the thing that you
dig
start
in,
to engage
right?
and to ask those things so that that experience becomes meaningful. So it's really about discovery and building that experience.
Yeah.
Who do you get in the room for donor planning? Like when we're with a client, who do you get in there and what are you actually doing? Like I know you talk about these questions, but how do we actually do it with them and sit down?
So one of my examples was doing an enlistment for a chair for a capital campaign. We actually brought in the chair's husband, and he gave us a lot of insight about that, but her as a person, things that she liked, what was her favorite wine, where does she loves picnics, she likes to do certain things, and so he gave us so much more insight than we could ever imagine. So enlist the husband.
So we take a storyboard process. In one of the earlier episodes, we talked about plot, character, conflict, all those things, and now we're taking that and we're applying it to the donor to build that.
Yeah.
And how do we actually do it? Like, I know a lot of times I'm a big whiteboard fan, but like, how do you guys do it, with your clients?
I whiteboard all the time.
Same.
I've found this is, for a lot of people, they love this. For a lot of people, it's the most stretching exercise for them because they've just never done it, or it's just one of the harder things. And so we get a whiteboard out and start asking questions, start prioritizing what they know about this relationship. Who are the people because sometimes the people aren't in the room yet. And so we ask, well, who's going to know that? And so it's bringing a husband in, bringing, friends in, bringing people in who can help you make that experience both what it needs to be for the donor and also to meet the needs of the organization.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit deeper about the actual donor planning process. And so if we're whiteboarding and we're talking about a donor, say it's a campaign, and maybe it's for an athletic facility, who knows? Who do you want to have in the room? Not only, you talked about there was a husband that you brought in, but like program staff wise, I think sometimes we forget that there are all these wonderful people in the organization that can help with this. So how do you use those folks?
Well, if it's an athletic facility, you're bringing in the athletic director. You may even bring in alumni relations or alumni director. So you're bringing all of those people on the program side, those folks that will know about what the needs are. They may have even, say if it's a specific donor that played sports, they may know that particular donor. They knew them when they were at the school, and so they can speak into what that person, that donor might be interested in.
Right. Yeah.
Coaches.
So it's not just the director of development and the ED in this process, right?
It takes a village, so you're bringing everybody to the table.
Right.
The ones that can actually speak into the project. Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you talk about a time like when you've been donor planning that how do you get that creativity out of people? Because I think, as you said, we're stretching them.
Squeeze it out.
Squeeze it out. So how do we get people to think creatively? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot of it is asking questions, and taking people back to memories they've had. So the first time I've ever been to Disney was last year.
What?
Oh,
Yeah,
first
and
time.
so and if you've ever been or watched a Disney movie, then you know just what that experience can be. And for me, it was like I was 5 years old.
Oh.
And I'm ready to go back. So when you think about how do we bring that into a conversation with staff and outside people for a donor plan, we talk about what are events happening at the school. Sometimes it's simple as triggering their mind about, oh, this event would be great because we're already doing something, one, and it's also something that we can really bring this donor prospect in because it aligns with their passions and their priorities. So thinking about what you already have and also asking them questions about what are experiences that have brought you all more closer to the organization. What have you come to, whether it be an event, whether it be a tour that you had, start to bring those things back to their memory, and that's going to help them start to think about that and use that creative muscle a little bit more.
After you get started and you get people and you start asking those questions, then people start to get a little more warmed up and understand where we're headed with it. And I feel like sometimes the best ideas come with just some random comment or somebody going, I remember them saying that they love this or X, Y, Z, and so I think just getting people in that right frame of mind, right?
What really came to mind is another client. It was random conversation. They're all at the table, they're talking, trying to throw out ideas, and someone said, I think this donor, he always wanted to drive the school bus, right?
Mine.
Yeah. So, drive the bus? Are you serious? Is that what's going to take him over the top? And it did. He got the opportunity to drive the bus.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just those simple things, simple things. It doesn't have to always be over the top, I think. And
we had one client, and they were soliciting or enlisting a couple to be chairs for a campaign, and they know that they loved, their favorite food was guacamole.
Okay.
They loved
a good guac will set it off.
And it was a Mexican restaurant that was really something that had a lot of memories in their life. And so when they were setting up to bring this couple in to enlist them, they actually their welcome table was set up like a table at the restaurant that they go to, and it had guacamole and other things that just gave them the memories that they had as a young couple, and that's what spoke to them.
A good guacamole is transformational, I tell you that.
It is. Amen. Yeah. So we've got the donor plan. We start to work with our client to actually interact with these donors and get to know them. What are some of the mistakes, though, or some of the hurdles we've seen our clients encounter with getting into this process of cultivating a donor?
Making your move too soon. Sometimes it takes time, right? It takes time. And so when it's right, you'll know it's right because you have worked every angle, you've had all the meetings, you've connected with them. And so you've gotten to the place where they're ready to say yes, but you just haven't asked them yet. And so once you get to that place where you know they're right, it's time to make that ask. But if you make that move too soon, that might not be well for you.
Yeah, I remember a time I made that mistake earlier in my career.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest learning from it was we went in and just assumed that because it's always easier to spend other people's money. And we really assumed that because this person gave to a lot of organizations that we were just going to be the next in line. And without building that trust first, and And they told us, unfortunately, it was the kind of relationship that over time we were able to go back and say, this is what we should have done better, this is what we learned. But building that trust, particularly where there's not the rapport and there's not a previous relationship, is going to be critical to having the opportunity for the donor prospect to be ready to say yes.
Right.
You may be ready as an organization all day, but they may not be ready yet to be able to say yes.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges we sometimes have is slowing down our clients, right? Because everybody's on fire to get those first gifts. And of course, we want early wins and we want to, raise as much money as we can as soon as we can. But I think one of the biggest challenges we have is slowing down and getting them to realize it could take multiple steps here, before we're ready.
It will. I think you need to be prepared to go in with an understanding that this is going to be a very time-intensive opportunity, but the transformation is what's going to be what happens.
I think we've probably seen it. I've even seen it with clients where when they have gone a little too fast, that gift that comes, is a lovely gift, but it's not the capacity transformational gift. And so I think what we're really trying to teach is to take that time, because it's going to pay off in the end of getting, hopefully to that transformational place where they're truly inspired, right? I think that's, one thing that we see is, we've got to get to that inspiration level with folks. All right, guys, we could talk about this forever. We can talk about prospects and donor plans and transformational donor experiences forever, but let's wrap this up. So what are some of the key takeaways from this conversation that you feel you've gotten out of this?
Slow it down. It's going to come to you when it's supposed to come.
Discovery. It's not what you're doing to be able to just be right, but you discover so that you can be transformational. I think that's the thing to remember, is that process is about being effective and then using that effectively to build those relationships.
And I think it's always good to remind ourselves that, and remind our clients that it's not going to be new sources that is just going to rain down, the new money. We're really talking about going to the people who already love their mission and who are already giving to them. And that's going to be where, the transformational gifts come from. And reminding them of that it's not going to be all new donors, that it's going to be those that already give that are really going to be the sources. So, all right. Well, thank you all for joining us for episode 3. We've talked about the story. We've talked about leadership. Now we've talked about prospects. And so next week, we're going to pull it all together and talk about the plans. Thanks so much for joining us today. And thank you to Josh and Kedrian for joining us for this and representing H-Town. And so if y'all are in Houston, we would love to talk to you and visit with you. And just thanks so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of our summer break series, Summer School Edition. We are excited to hear from you and hope that you will submit questions about anything you heard today that you may want to know more about. We've set up a special place for you to do that at missionadvancement.com/summer break. So go to our website, missionadvancement.com/summer break, submit your questions, and a member of the Mission Advancement team will answer them via video on social media over the summer. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.